back after that short break. Now we'll have a session on how to create value for innovation program post-graduation performance. Mastering innovation, strategy, process, and tools enables you to achieve success by showing you how to deploy technology, tools, and principles to effectively recognize, evaluate, and validate new opportunities. Create corporate culture that fosters ongoing company-wide creativity. Build an architecture that allows innovation to thrive throughout your company. Successfully invest for future growth while managing the risks of disruption. Perfect your own creative problem-solving skills while developing these skills across your organization. Determine when to enact radical innovation from within and when to seek it externally. Utilize design thinking and lean validation methods to hasten your response to opportunities. To begin the session, we have with us Ms. Fiza Khalid. Ms. Fiza is a doctoral researcher in entrepreneurship and innovation management at the University of Edinburgh Business School. Her research focuses on whether, why, or how an entrepreneurship support model functions differently in developing entrepreneurial ecosystems and economies. Her work explores and challenges incubators and accelerators face and how do they cope with the needs of regional ecosystems within lack of social, cultural, and material resources in a developing context. She is also working on a research program funded by UKRI and ESRC to map the entrepreneurial resiliency, innovation, and change during the COVID-19 crisis. Let's listen to Ms. Fiza Khalid. Over to you, Ms. Fiza.
Hi everyone, this is Fiza. Thanks for the introduction. So maybe I don't have much to say. You have already introduced me so well. So I'll quickly start talking about my findings, and I'll just give you a brief overview of literature review because I do understand that most of you will be coming from the practice background or the research background. So I'll try to keep it short. Just give me a second to just start sharing the presentation. It's a bit of a mess. I'm not really a technology savvy, so just give me a second for that. Okay, I hope all of you can see that. I'll go in the presentation mode. Let me know if if there's something wrong going on. Okay, as my introduction has been, so in my research, I try to understand the working of business accelerators in developing economies. So let me be very clear about it. Initially, I moved into the acceleration side, but then when you go into the field and you find out that, okay, in developing economies, there's not, there's no clear distinction between acceleration and incubation, and it will come down into my later on research findings as well that we need to understand the difference between the two because developing economies are merging the two models, which will eventually we'll find out that probably is the best thing to do for now. So I'll keep the presentation more near to the practice with brief background to literature and research approach and focus on findings in practice for learning. Quickly, just to give you an overview of that I'm working on whether, why, and how the accelerator model functions differently in developing economies with some sub-questions around the challenges accelerators face, how do they cope with them, and a wider perspective looking at the effects on entrepreneurial ecosystem. So just a brief background that accelerators are usually praised as an entrepreneurial matchmaker in ecosystem. In 2005, Y Combinator and Techstars from Silicon Valley marked the start of accelerator model, and it is defined to be a cohort-based fixed mentoring and educational program offering opportunities for networking and funding through a pitch event or a demo day. With the popularity of the concept, many types of accelerators are now working and they are in practice all over the world. In general, acceleration is gaining popularity in practice but lacks academic research, especially outside the developed ecosystems. The infographics of accelerators suggest that while there were around 2,000 startups accelerated till 2013 from around 187 accelerators worldwide, it rose to 11,000 till 2016 from 584 accelerators, according to the Global Accelerator Report. For now, there is no exact number of accelerators worldwide, but the Entrepreneurship Research Foundations expect them to be equal to the number of Startups in 2016, which is just this is just an underestimation because around 7,000 programs were identified just in Europe and America in 2018. And the number keeps on increasing. So just to contribute in the debate, I carried a detailed literature review of studies on effects of acceleration. I'm proposing a framework of threefold impact on cultural, social, and material attributes of acceleration on entrepreneurial ecosystem. Starting from a micro level, accelerators enhance the value of cohorts by providing physical infrastructure, training and learning, networking, mentoring and advising, investment sometimes, investment capital and support services. At a meso level, accelerators are able to promote the entrepreneurial activities and develop a supportive ecosystem around them and around the whole ecosystem. And then on a macro level, the acceleration phenomena is related to have an impact on the economy of the region, which is a far shot, but still, we are looking into the changes as well. They provide intermediary connections. They are active in job creation and employment opportunities. They help in creation and diffusion of knowledge, and then overall strengthen their entrepreneurial ecosystem. Considering all these factors, like the entrepreneurial and economic impact of accelerators in developed economies, developing economies, are looking into the movement as well because the impact was substantial and reason enough for developing economies to invest in the system because we have the incubation model, but the accelerator model is comparatively new. And later on in my findings, we'll actually figure out that how, as a developing economy, we work with, the limited resources that we have. However, it is still not clear that how acceleration works effectively in developing economies because according to studies and according to practice, the accelerator model is predicted on the existence of a supportive entrepreneurial ecosystem because it's just bringing everything together. It's not really, creating things. It's it's just making it easier for everyone to access those resources. And so how does it work in developing economies or developing ecosystems within lack of opportunities and resources, weak legal and economic structure, societal pressures and cultural beliefs that goes against, pursuing an entrepreneurial career? So this all things, these are all things create an opportunity to explore acceleration within different geographical, entrepreneurial, and economic conditions. And this is what I'm doing in my research as well. So just quickly give you, probably you guys won't be interested in the research design and all that. I'm following an abductive approach, which is, so that I can understand the institutional voids in developing ecosystem and how accelerators support entrepreneurial ecosystem within these institutional voids, because as developing economies, we lack right institutions to figure out everything. And then I'm connecting it with the mobility and mutation model of that, how things are moving from a developed ecosystem to underdeveloped or developing ecosystems. So my data collection is focused on developing economies with increasing entrepreneurial tendencies, developing ecosystem, weak economic and political structure. I have conducted around 45 semi-structured interviews, each around 45 to 60 minutes with accelerator managers, entrepreneurs, investors, and some government officials. And now that I'm analyzing things, so I'm figuring out that, okay, there are few questions that need to be answered, so I might be going into a second round of data collection as well. And then I'll quickly go into a few preliminary findings that I'm coming with my data. So the first one is, that actually helps me to understand the ecosystem. It helped me think beyond, the common perception about the developing ecosystem and economies that they lack everything. So first, overall, the ecosystems are developing and connections are strengthening. Considering the most of the developing ecosystems are only 5 to 6 years old, we can't really see the differences in just 5-6 years. The ecosystem needs time, like 10-20 years, then you start seeing changes, you start seeing impact on different changes. But I will, there are some lags, there are some weaknesses that we need to, question for now. There's less understanding of differences between incubator and accelerator. There are a few, incubator managers that I talked to, and they were like, there is no difference. We are offering everything that an accelerator is offering. But the approach is different when you come by definition. And then this might be because like mostly are working in parallel, incubators and accelerators. There's also lack of trust, which I figured out is due to lack of resources and lack of genuine ideas. So there's lack of trust between entrepreneurs to entrepreneur. There's lack of trust between entrepreneurs and investors. They don't want to share their ideas with them because they see that okay, they'll take over our idea and then implement it much better than us. So there are problems. There are trust issues as well. And the one thing that everyone agreed upon is that government policies are worse than expected, which they are actually, driving business out of the country because you can't really work over there with these, like strict consideration with most regular policies. Compared to that, different countries have different policies. Everyone is working on the policies, but it's very slow. If government policies could be helpful, the whole ecosystem can develop much faster compared to when the government policies resist the change. And then specifically some challenges for accelerators in developing economies. So it actually stood out, like we say that, okay, entrepreneurs are facing challenges, but support models, support institutions are facing challenges as well. I'm dividing them into internal challenges and external challenges. Internal challenges relate to the program structure and the teams that comes up, and the external challenges comprise of investments, support, and impact issues. Where every, like overall, the whole concept comes down to basic four problems, that is poor network and sparse resources in the ecosystem. Then we have lack of experience, money, and confidence in entrepreneurs, weak policy environment that I was just talking about, the government issues and institutional support overall, and lastly, pure investments in accelerator programs, not just, the entrepreneurs, they're pure investments in the programs as well. So these are the things that, accelerators face, and then we need to worry about them. And these probably are the reasons that we need to change our program and, make it more towards the regional needs. Then there is something interesting coming out of developing economies and developing ecosystem. That's how do they deal with, with least resources that we have. So these are the practices that are coming along in my research. There are four variations in basic acceleration model. The first one is the traveling accelerator. That's the most popular concept that's coming along. It arranges mentoring and investment workforce in different cities to increase the reach to regional ecosystem. Because as I said, not every ecosystem has everything. Some city has good investors, some city has good entrepreneurial mindset. So they move their cohort into different cities, and then obviously it requires investment and all for the accelerator to move them or target the whole audience in different cities and then introduce them to them. But it was a very popular concept in terms of a traveling accelerator. And the second one was kind of a greenhouse model. I initially, understood it as an incubation model, but it's not an incubation model. It's a greenhouse model where experienced entrepreneurs train a startup, invest in them, and eventually step down when the founders are ready to run independently. They have no individual, they work on individual pace, they have no curriculum, no duration set, one-to-one mentoring, but there are acceleration platforms that are following the greenhouse model. They're less popular, but still this practice is going on. And then the most popular one is the incubation and acceleration merger. This is like merging the two basic model of incubation and acceleration. Most incubators are starting their own acceleration programs or merging the modules. Most of the times, the sponsors, uh, the government, corporates or private sector are coming together and starting the incubation and acceleration. These are bid outs, incubators. The incubators are run by the government. Acceleration are coming with the corporate sector. They have their own interest, but as a combined effort, it's kind of a merger of incubation and acceleration. Sometimes people who graduate from incubators, they move on to the acceleration. Some are actually practicing, like 6 months of incubation and 3 months of acceleration. So there are different, changes in that how do they run their whole program. And the last one that I feel is a requirement for now is the forward and backward integration and acceleration. So what happens around in forward and backward integration is, so accelerators and funding platforms are integrating into each other. Either forward integrating to establish their accelerators are forward integrating to establish their own venture capital funds when they are looking into investing in their own cohorts, or somebody who's outside of their acceleration platform as well, or a backward integration by venture capital firms, and they're providing mentoring service. That is mainly because like they keep on complaining about, okay, we never invest in the startups directly out of accelerator because they're not up to the level. So what they are doing is, they find potential in a startup, and then they take them in, and then they start guiding them as well. Because most of the managers of venture capital funds, they have their own experience, they have their some experience in starting a business or some experience in banking, and also they understand the whole investment platform. So they're moving into their own advising companies and advising systems as well. So these four are the most emerging models coming out of developing economies. And then there were some other findings that still need to be, there are few things that are emerging, but they need some more depth analysis. I haven't gotten into a lot of analysis in terms of that. The first thing is exposure and connections to developed ecosystem. That was very interesting for me, because individuals with exposure and connections to much developed ecosystem are more confident and successful in general. I still have to figure out that why they were successful, but from the investors' perspective as well, they were preferring people who have some exposure to developed ecosystem, either UK or US. They work at Silicon Valley or some startup or they had some experience. Either it's a foreign degree or either it's a job, international job or something, that they think that like they understand the whole startup ecosystem better than the people who are coming out of the universities, and they were creating better entrepreneurial environment overall. Then there is a lot of collaboration going on between developing economies and developing economies in terms of learning and sharing experiences. Entrepreneurs are also expanding into similar markets, and then there were some acceleration programs are also, like critiqued for inappropriate curriculum, mentors coming from not, startup or entrepreneurship background, coming out of the corporate sector, and undue attention to the social value startups that we all love, like this, they catch the eye of the investors, especially international investors are really interested in, the social value startups. So people who are like really into the business and they didn't have any social value, they have issues with, like they are the ones who get the limelight in terms of any investor, or they are the ones who are being, presented in front of the investors, international investors. And in general, the quality versus quantity focus, because the government-run accelerators and incubators were producing so many cohorts and compared to the private ones. And then there is a debate going on between, either you are into the quantity or the quality. Government sector support institutions are mostly into going towards, like producing a number of startups. That doesn't matter that do they sustain or how much do they sustain, whereas private are very, like they take 6 to 7 startups a cohort, and then all of them were working. So there is a quality and quantity debate going on as well. So these are just, like a preliminary findings that I'm looking into, and I'm trying to develop a basic framework out of it, theoretically basically, but I hope, you can take some learning out of in terms of practice as well. So what is taking me out of here is that looking at my data, I understand that developing economies differ in social, cultural, and material resources for entrepreneurs and ventures. The entrepreneurial ecosystem differ on the basis of network strength and resources. There's another thing, in coming out of developing ecosystem is developing ecosystem does lack resources, but they don't lack network strength. So there is a debate going on. Not every developing economy has a developing ecosystem. No. Because you cannot, categorize every developing economy as having a developing ecosystem. That's not true. And the research findings on emerging acceleration models, entrepreneurial connections, and exposure to developed ecosystem, all these, like the three perspectives takes us to suggest that, accelerator model should be designed and studied as an unbounded and dynamic relational assemblage rather than an export-import model of entrepreneurship. Because what you are initially coming out of is, like the model was started in Silicon Valley, and then people who worked there, they came back and implemented it over here. But it's not the same thing, they are making changes, and it's a learning process. And then they are working upon that, they are working through that, they are making changes, they are adjusting to the regional needs. And it takes time to develop something, and we are already seeing the changes. So it's, for that matter, not just acceleration, the whole all the entrepreneurship models are not export import models. There's mobility, but there's mutation as well, in the good sense. These are the few things that I'm actually looking into. And then for now, there are a few emerging questions from my research as well. Like basically, like looking into the whole ecosystem and the accelerator model, that whether and how accelerators create a substantial impact in the absence of a supportive ecosystem, and do the regional translations add to the overall global acceleration model, and how do they shape and are shaped by place-based entrepreneurial ecosystem, the regional context debate, and what are the conditioning fields and institutions and actors within which the entrepreneurial model mobilization and mutation happen. Because we do understand that the ecosystem developed with the mobility of people, that you we from developing ecosystem, like we move into develop ecosystem, we learn from that, we attend international networking events, we visit their platforms, and then we come back and then change them, implement them. So who are those people, who are those institutions who are actually taking the change, and what could be the implications on the ecosystem as a result of cosmopolitanizing the acceleration model? So these are a few things that my research is really looking into, and hopefully, I will be able to like come out with something good in terms of like how developing ecosystems are not just lack of resources and lack of opportunities. They're how they are actually working into building themselves up. That is all. Thank you so much for hearing me out. Hope there was something for every stakeholder to carry and adjust to the program to regional needs. I am up for any type of suggestions and questions now or later on, whenever you guys think it's the right time to do that.
I think we don't have any questions as of now.
Okay.
Okay, so that was, I think, it was a really informative session, Fizza. Thank you so much for joining us today in Summit. Okay, so next we have with us Dr. Pawan. Dr. Pawan is a partner of F50 Elevate and co-founder of 3PM Ventures. He is an author, speaker, and investor. He has 20 plus years of experience in startups and enterprise across India, Middle East, and USA. He has funded multiple companies across USA, UK, and India. He is also specialized in business strategy, partnerships, innovation, and driving change. Let me invite Dr. Pawan for his presentation. Over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Aparna. Thanks for having me on this program. I just heard my previous speaker, and it was quite informative. And I was also there on the first day. It's a great initiative, trying to build this whole network and also connecting all the entrepreneurs, especially in the small and medium sector, because in any country, in any geography, in any economy, SME is the one segment which is a backbone of the industry and also the economy. So it's a great initiative, and I really appreciate it. The topic today is how do these incubation and acceleration programs really can add value, and what really needs to be done after a particular startup or a program or a series of programs are run, and how do you really leverage on that. Before I really dive into it, I just want to touch very briefly about incubation and acceleration. Like Simon Sinek says, anything should start with why. So why do you really need an incubator or accelerator? So there could be many reasons why you have incubators and accelerators. You have commercial ones like Y Combinator, where the motive is very clear. They want to bring some great ideas to shape and fund them, and then make commercial value out of it. And there are some very non-profit oriented, like Atal incubation is one such thing, where governments or industry bodies are getting involved to fund them. And there could be also universities, right, which where incubation and acceleration is very predominantly exists. If you look into some of the ecosystems, like for example, University is a great ecosystem where many startups have emerged, including Google, Sun Systems, and all that. It's a huge history starting from HP. And sometimes even community gets together to form these incubators and accelerators. Part of Mass Challenge, which is funded by the industry, it's a very non-profit oriented, and they want to help young entrepreneurs across the world to cross the first early stages of their startup journey and become successful without any commercial motive. So these are the various reasons why these incubators exist, and sometimes it is the ecosystem that drives it. For example, if you look into Africa, there are so many accelerators and all are coming up because there is a huge need to help the local youth, especially in India, right? There's so many accelerators and incubators are coming out. The most successful fund, for example, Indian Institute of Sciences has a great program, though they take equity and stakes, but still these programs really help a great deal for young entrepreneurs to give shape to their ideas. And the next question comes is what do these incubators and accelerators do, right? I mean, mostly these are incubators and accelerators are defined by their program structure. How it is really structured. Is it training? Is it training plus some industry connect? Is it training plus some real business development? There are different models which are there. What do they really do? And again, every incubator or accelerator is very uniquely placed in that direction to define themselves in terms of what they really contribute, to be unique and also to stand out among this competitive space. And final thing is, how do you do it, right? When you have a purpose, when you have an objective, how do you really deliver it, right? That is when really you look at into the nitty-gritties of running these programs in terms of creating market awareness about your program, defining a business model, whether you take equity or you take a fee or you don't do anything, but you are only social focused. And then, strategy, like any other segment, like any other industry, any other business, incubation, acceleration is also a competitive space, right? There are many incubators and accelerators who are competing to get the best of the founders and startups to join them. And every accelerator or incubator to survive in the long term has to, carve out its own niche and then create value there and create their own brand. So having said that, let's just move on to the next thing, like how to create value, right? How do these accelerators and incubators really create value? What are the different ways this can be done? One is through the program. So how do you structure your program? Some of the programs are very, very unique. For example, you take Y Combinator. Y Combinator does not give you a place to work, does not give you a place to stay. They just meet you every Tuesday and ask you a whole lot of questions, and which is they call it as office hours. And this model has become so successful. Some of the well-known companies across the world, like Airbnb and all that, came out of the Y Combinator. Similarly, different accelerators have different models. But eventually they're all about creating value, and the program also has a wide reach so that they are able to attract the best talent and also able to attract the best of the founders to join those programs. Again, like any other competitive business, these programs have to be very unique. You could be sector focused, like you could be fintech, you could be deep tech, you could be retail tech. But again, your program structure defines your uniqueness. And next comes is resources and partners, right? Every incubator and accelerator have some key people whom we call them as partners, who are really driving the entire program and the structure and the business of accelerator or incubator. And these people, with their own background, their expertise, their knowledge, industry connects, they really define how this incubator gets branded. And then, it does not just help having a great program or great training or having a great facility does not really bring all the value you need to be successful. The most important thing for an incubator or accelerator is the network. What sort of network you have to help the startups which are part of your program? Are you connected with the industry? Are you connected with the knowledge bank, which comes through expertise, some domain experts, some industry leaders, some thought leaders, right? Like, for example, Vinod Khosla is part of a accelerator called Alchemist in USA. I mean, his association with this program gives us such an immense value because he's seen to be a thought leader when he talks about any subject, any topic, or any area related to the future. So every incubator or accelerator should have a very wide network to be really successful and attract great talent in terms of connecting with the industry, the personalities, and also in terms of creating value to the founders and the startups. So the next point I want to talk about is the managing performance. Right? You have a great brand, you have a great program, you have great network, and now how do you manage the performance? Right? Uh, the managing performance of a startup or the founder. We need to accept when a startup comes into an accelerator program or an incubator program, they're pretty raw. You don't expect them to be efficient or aware or bring expertise through the founders in 360 degrees what is needed for at least business to be successful. Every startup has its own gaps. Either sometimes founders are very good in sales but they lack technology expertise, or sometimes they are very good in technology that they don't know how to sell their products, or sometimes the realities of the market are so brutal, they they just get lost uh, in terms of losing focus and getting distracted due to some setbacks what they see once they launch the products or services. So this is where really it becomes very important for incubator and accelerator to engage continuously with the startups and founders. It is not just that you run a great 8 week or 12 week or 8 months program, then you give them a certification saying like you graduated out of our program, but that has no real value unless this startup or the founders are able to achieve the objectives they have set while becoming part of the program. And this is where their failure also defines your own failure as an incubator or accelerator. So whenever a new founder or a new startup is trying to choose an accelerator to join or an incubator to join, first thing they see is what is the pedigree. What is your which are the startups which became successful from your past programs. And if you don't have a great portfolio, you are not able to you will never attract great founders to join the future programs. So it is very important to understand, as the startup is struggling, the accelerators and incubators are also equally struggling to create their own brand value and acquire great portfolios. So the couple of things which are really important for accelerators to continuously manage this performance is engagement. You have to continuously engage with these startups which graduate out of your program by defining certain KPIs. You can define KPIs saying like, your startup to be really successful, gain traction, you need to achieve this things, and periodically you review them. That's one way. Say next is introductions. You could introduce them based on the sector where they are operating, whether it is B2B, B2C, fintech, deep tech, wherever. You can do some industry introductions, or you can do some periodic reviews just to see like how well they are performing. So every startup that goes out of your program, you could define certain milestones to achieve, certain time bound milestones to achieve, and you could do some periodic reviews. Another thing is to improve their access and reach. Many of these programs, accelerator incubator programs, have partnerships with industries. Like, they partner with AWS, they partner with Google, or they partner with some other large organizations, not only to give them some concessional services, but also to give them an opportunity to present and to promote their own products and services. And another good way for accelerators and incubators to get involved is having regular periodic events, right? You could have some monthly events, or you could have some quarterly events where you showcase these startups, or you could also partner with some large other event organizers which are connected with the startup ecosystem or the industry where these startups are operating, and bring them an opportunity to showcase their own products and services. And many accelerators and incubators do demo days, pitch days, and they do regular webinars, to bring some of these founders and startups to showcase their services and products. So this is a continuous activity which an incubator and accelerator must do to manage not just the performance of the startup, but also the performance of their own portfolio and their own programs. And final thing is exits, right? Eventually the success is defined whether you are a for-profit or non-profit. The success is defined by how many startups that were part of your program have great exits, or have large investments, or got some mergers and acquisitions. So these are the things which really define the success of your portfolio and also your program. I think the partners at the accelerator incubator, to manage their own performance, should constantly aim to help these startups and founders to have these meaningful opportunities where they could explore mergers, acquisitions, or gain large investments, and eventually leading to exits. And if you have some great portfolio with good investments and few exits, that defines the brand of your accelerator. So, and the last point I want to touch is about building brand and leadership. As I said in the beginning, like any other company, like any other startup, even accelerator is performing in a very competitive space, and it is extremely important to stand out among the crowd with your own brand, right? If you're an accelerator with some good successful stories, then that is where you would get recognition and you will attract the best talent. Only when you get the best talent of founders, you will be able to bring out some great stories and great startups that eventually become successful in the space. So a few ways where you could enhance your brand and acquire your leadership position in this crowded space is communication. Communication is the most important aspect of a accelerator. If you are not able to create an ecosystem around your accelerator where people regularly visit or attend your events, attend your webinars, attend your meetups, and attend your demo days, then you are not effective in attracting or building an ecosystem around your accelerator. Every accelerator should be and must be able to build an ecosystem around them, which includes not just includes startups, but also, as I said, thought leaders, domain experts, investors, advisors, mentors. These all form the part of the ecosystem, and also industry. And only through communication you will be able to showcase and you will be able to position yourself against the competition. And next thing is about community. Right. Irrespective of what it is, whether you work for profit or non-profit, whether you're an incubator or an accelerator, you should always have a community focus, because entrepreneurship is such a thing that unless you have a very strong community built around that idea, which eventually takes shape in the form of a product or a service, you'll not be able to attract these startups to join your programs. in this competitive space, if you want those founders choose you among different choices, then it could happen in a bigger way based on how you build the community around it. And, this community can happen through networking events. You could do meetups, you could do seminars, webinars. You could just have open offices, open office hours, and you could also showcase this by demonstrating the talent which is running these programs. Many a times there is a great talent running accelerators and incubators, but they are all hidden. They are not very well known. Simple boot camps online would create huge awareness about your incubation and acceleration programs. If every activity you do need not have a purpose or a specific outcome related to your own accelerator. Sometimes doing things to educate, to share knowledge, and to communicate with the community creates a huge brand value. And this is where you can have an edge over your competition. For example, YC runs the online program which is free, right? I mean, this helps to grow the community, and at some point they pick up good startups from that program. And last thing is social networks, right? I think accelerators, incubators should effectively use social networks. If you see, most of the startup founders are coming from younger generation or from early employments. People in early 30s who become part of it. And every accelerator or an incubator should have a huge presence on the social network, and this can come at no cost, right? Putting some posts on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and communicating not just about your programs, but also about your founders, your startups, and the way these people are able to disrupt and create value in the market. This would be a huge impact in creating your own brand and achieving a leadership role. And finally, I just want to wind this up by saying, every incubator accelerator is a startup by itself. Just because you are able to create a program for startups does not mean you are not a startup. You yourself are a startup. Unless you communicate, you build, and you constantly innovate to stay in that startup mode, you will not be able to attract startups. Your own culture in-house, if you bring bureaucracy, if you look like very rigid, process oriented, you're bound to fail. So the best way to rate your own performance is to see how close are you being a startup. And only when you're close being a startup, when you behave like a startup, you will do all those things which a startup does to become successful, and you will constantly innovate. So the final thoughts are: be a startup, challenge yourself constantly, create your own brand, and always aim for leadership. Don't just spread thin, trying to get every sector, every segment, every industry, but always focus on areas where you have great partners running the programs, you have great programs, and you have great industry connects, and where you are able to build a huge community around it. And if you do all these things in a very innovative and agile mode, constantly challenging yourself internally to create that compelling programs and ecosystems, I mean, there is no reason why you will not be successful. And all this can come only by constantly managing the performance, both internally and also across your portfolio. Yeah, these are my thoughts about the topic. And if there are any questions, I'm happy to answer.
I think there are no questions as of now, but it's a very, very informative session. Thank you for joining us today. On behalf of GCPIT, let me thank both of you, Ms. Fiza Khalid and Dr. Pawan Kumar, for taking the time to join us today in this Global Innovation, Incubation and Entrepreneurship Summit 2021.
Right.
Once again, we take a short break and we'll be back with our founder, Mr. Santosh Ganesh, to enlighten us with his thoughts about the learnings of these 3 days. Stay tuned.
Thank you. All the best.